During summer break, my dad tied up my 9-year-old son and left him outside in 95-degree heat with a sign around his neck that said, "I'm a thief," all because of a lie he never bothered to check. When I got back, my son had collapsed on the concrete and my dad was sitting inside with a cup of coffee like nothing happened. My son Eli is 9 years old and he's the quietest, most well-behaved kid you'll ever meet in your life. He doesn't talk back. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't cause problems or throw fits. He reads books in the corner at family events and says please and thank you without being reminded. He's 9 years old and he's better behaved than most adults I know. I'm a single dad. Eli's mom passed when he was 4. Since then, it's been me and him against everything. My parents live about 40 minutes away and I've always tried to keep them involved. Every summer, Eli stays with them for a week while I work extra shifts at the plant. It gives him time with his grandparents and gives me time to pick up overtime so I can keep the bills covered. This summer was supposed to be the same. I dropped Eli off on a Monday morning. He had his backpack, his books, his toothbrush, everything packed neat the way he always does it. Dad shook his hand at the door like he always does. Mom kissed his forehead and said they'd take good care of him. I drove away feeling fine. No reason not to. On Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from my mother. She was whispering, "You need to come get Eli. What happened? Your father lost it. Just come." I drove 40 minutes in 25, ran 2 red lights, didn't care. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I saw was Eli sitting on the front porch steps. His face was bright red. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. His wrists had red marks on them from where something had been tied around them. Rope. My father had used rope on a 9-year-old. There was a piece of cardboard hanging around his neck on a string. It said, "I'm a thief," in black marker. He wasn't crying. He was just sitting there staring at the ground like he'd given up on something. I ran to him and dropped to my knees. I picked him up and his skin was burning hot to the touch. His lips were dry and cracked. He could barely hold his head up. I carried him to the car and blasted the AC. I poured water over his head and made him drink. He threw up twice. While I was holding my son in the backseat of my car trying to cool him down, my dad walked out the front door holding a mug of coffee. Not rushing, not worried, just walking out like it was a Sunday morning. "What did you do to him?" My voice was shaking. "I taught him a lesson. He stole $20 from your mother's purse. He's 9 years old enough to steal, old enough to learn." I looked at my son. "Eli, did you take Grandma's money?" He shook his head slowly. He could barely talk. "I didn't take it, Dad." I told him I didn't. I turned back to my father. "How long was he out here?" "Couple hours." "In this heat, tied up with a sign around his neck?" That's how I was raised and I turned out fine. I drove Eli to the emergency room. The doctor said he had heat exhaustion and was close to heat stroke. They put him on IV fluids and kept him for observation for 6 hours. A nurse pulled me aside and asked me what happened. I told her everything. She said she was legally required to file a report. I looked at her and said, "Go ahead, file it. I want it on record." While Eli was sleeping in the hospital bed, I called my mother. "Where were you when he did this?" She was quiet for a long time. "I was inside. I told your father to bring him in, but he said Eli needed to learn. I should have done more." "Yeah, you should have. Your father found the money later. It was in the couch cushion. Eli didn't take anything." I hung up. My 9-year-old son was in a hospital bed with rope burns on his wrists and an IV in his arm because my father punished him for something that never happened. The money was in the couch the whole time. Nobody checked. Nobody asked. Nobody thought to look before tying a child to a porch in the middle of summer. CPS opened a case. The police came to my apartment and took my statement. I told them everything. My father was charged with child endangerment and unlawful restraint. He called me that night from my mother's phone because I'd already blocked his number. "You called the cops on your own father? You tied my son to a chair outside in 95 degrees over $20 that was in your couch. I was trying to raise him right. You're too soft on that boy. He's in a hospital. He almost had heat stroke. You didn't even check if he actually took the money." I said I was sorry. "No, you didn't. And even if you did, it wouldn't matter." I hung up. Mom tried next. She wanted me to drop the charges. She said Dad was sorry, that he went too far, that it would never happen again. She said pressing charges would tear the family apart. I told her the family was already torn the second she stood inside and let it happen. The charges went through. Dad got probation, community service, and a restraining order. Mom chose to stay with him. Eli doesn't ask about Grandpa anymore.